Today's conversation is sponsored by the Billy Keels Advisory Program. If you want to learn more about how to make your 9-to-5 optional, just go to billykeels.com/advising. Once again, that's billykeels.com/advising.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast, the #1 podcast for the strategies, tactics, and actions high wage earners need for living an intentionally designed life of wealth and resilience.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in building that wealthy and resilient life that you're looking to live and looking to live even faster. I'm your host, Billy Keels, and I'm super excited to welcome you back to another episode. And I also want to say thank you to every single one of you who continues to download the episodes. You continue to share them. You continue to tag us across social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Really appreciate you doing that because you continue to attract more people to the podcast, and we continue to be in the top 1.5% of podcasts across the globe. So thank you for that. For those of you who are leaving your honest written reviews as well as ratings, couldn't thank you enough. And so I want to say, if you also want to know how to leave that honest written review, there's a really slick video here. You can just click on it and it'll show exactly how to leave your honest written review. Want to know what the things that you like, the things that you want to see changed. That's one of the reasons that you're getting more of the solo episodes. So we take your feedback very, very seriously to give you the best podcast and podcast production available. Also, for those of you that want to check out any of the previous podcasts, just go to billykeels.com/podcast. Once again, that's billykeels.com/podcasts. So one of the things I want to talk about today, the thing that I really want to bring up, and this is something that comes up very frequently in calls that I have with anyone who's either looking for advisory services or even with my existing advisory service clients. And it's something that I went through, I struggled with a lot. And I also realized that there were things that I did that helped me to feel much less stressed and also give me more control of the day and the time that I had while I was working at the day job. So, and because I hear it all the time, because it's something that I lived through, I just want to share like what I did and the way that it helped me to kind of overcome that stress feeling as it related to the side hustle. Because, and maybe I'll just tell you a little story here, but like one of the things, if I think back to where I was in my corporate career, I'd managed a business that was $100 million business across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I was in a global marketing role. I had these really big responsibilities. But one of my big dreams, and I know I've talked about this before, was to become a managing director or a CEO of a geography. And so one of the things that I accepted to do was take a lateral move. So I took the lateral move from managing a really big business to an individual contributor role. So moving from a sales leader to an individual contributor. I struggled the first year, second year got better, and then the third year, and that's kind of where I am now that I'm telling the story, is that third year, I was really crushing it at work. Like I had achieved 240% of my target. The promotion opportunities really started to roll in because I'd performed for 3 years. I'd showed and demonstrated my capabilities. And as all these things were happening, it was the first time in my career that I decided to say no to a promotion, which was a complete contradiction because I took this role in order to, like, when you're in the top talent program, and they had a different name, but it's the same as the top talent program. You take these types of roles to demonstrate the capability to then move forward faster. And so it was almost ironic that in the third year of this role, which is usually the time when you would change, which is what I'd been previously doing, this was a time where I said, well, no, I don't actually want to take the role, because one of the things that I was working towards was I wanted to be able to make more money. I wanted to also be able to increase the portfolio that I was building outside of the side hustle. And at the same time, I was like, you know what? I want to feel like I have much more control of my goals, because when I have much more control of my goals, like then I'm actually being the right example that I wanted to be for my little boys, because I was controlling more of my time. Assets were giving me more control, giving me more freedom, et cetera, et cetera. So I was on this path, but also one of the things that started happening was my portfolio at this point. I planned on getting to a portfolio I was going to get to the goal in 5 years. Well, as good fortune took it, because I had a solid plan, I was taking action. It only took me 18 months. Well, that was the good part. The bad part was there was so much money coming in. There was so much infrastructure for the side hustle that I needed to actually be able to build that I didn't know what to do. The success was actually crushing me. It was actually having me spend more time, more mental energy, more physical energy on my side hustle than I was on my day job. And it was just exhausting. It got to be really, really tough. And so one of the things that I realized is, it was now in new circles, and I started seeing people that were hiring coaches, and I was wanting to understand why they were hiring a coach. And I looked across a number of different coaching opportunities. I ended up investing what I consider to be investing in myself. And I hired a coach. It was almost six figures that I invested in myself for this one coach for 1 year. And it was one of the things that really helped me recognize that, hey, listen, there are some shortcuts that can actually be taken. And this one specifically for you, that I realized that because I was struggling physically, mentally, I was spending so much time on the side hustle. And I realized that there were things that was doing during the work day that I could have done differently. And so these are the five things that I want to share with you that are going to help you to get much more control of your work day, help you to perform better, and at the same time alleviate some of the mental and physical exhaustion that you have. Now, these are really, really important that I know can help you get more control over your day, alleviate the mental and physical exhaustion. And here's the five steps, and I'm going to give you a little bit of color commentary with each one of them. First and foremost, the important thing is you must perform at a high level in your role. If you're not performing at what the company expects, at least at the minimum or above the minimum standards, the next four steps are gonna not even serve you, because you're starting from a place of weakness. So first and foremost, you must be performing in your current role. I was performing in my current role. I just mentioned to you before. I was at this point in time, I had 2 years of success, and over 100%, 240%, and promotions were coming in. So I was in a good position. Also, the thing that I was very fortunate, because I was in a sales organization. In sales, everybody cares about the outcomes that you do. They care about the result. What is the result? Are you putting numbers on the board? Yes or no? Nobody ever asked me in sales how many hours I was working. There were times where I told people, yeah, you know what, I spent all night working on this, or me and the team were, we were locked in a room and we spent 17 hours or whatever, something like that. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but maybe it was 8 hours straight. But it was being at a point where you're focused on results and not the hours that you're working, not the amount of time that your butt is sitting in a seat, so to speak. So that's the second thing. Start to focus on the results that you are supposed to produce for your company, not how much time you're spending on it. Because sometimes if you give yourself too much time, I think it's Parkinson's law, like you'll just fill up that time just because you have the time. Focus on getting results over focusing on spending time. The next key is absolutely critical. And this is one that you have to understand the context that you're working in. You have to understand what your relationship is with your direct line boss. So a lot of times in the big companies, you call it your N plus one. So who do you report to? Because at a certain point, when your side hustle starts really taking off, it's like I was at a point where there was so much that it was like, oh my gosh, like it was becoming success, and I was getting crushed by the success. So I had to let my boss in. Like this was 2 years, almost 3 years into actually the side hustle working, and I kind of kept it quiet. I didn't want people to know. I didn't want to be judged, but I had to let my boss know. And because I had the type of relationship with my boss at the time, I had to tell him. I just had to let him know, because I didn't want him to ever think that I was distracted. And I also need to understand, what specifically do you need me to keep doing so that Billy is never going to be one of the red lights on your radar? What are your bosses asking you for? And so having those open conversations to just say, like, all right, this is what I'm doing. At the same time, I'm performing at a really high level. I'm continuously giving you results. Help me understand, like, what are the things that you need from me to make sure that I'm never going to be an issue on your radar? Having those open conversations and getting your boss's buy-in to what you're doing, or at least an understanding, I find is absolutely critical. It may not be for everybody, but if you don't have your boss's buy-in and you don't know what your boss needs from you, and you're performing at a high level, but maybe they need something else beyond that, you're also putting yourself at risk. So get your boss's buy-in, share what you're doing, what's happening. That's what I did. It worked for me. And then that puts you on a much better path, because when you are overachieving with your results, when you are focused on consistently getting results, when you are having your boss's input, one of the byproducts of that is always going to almost always be, I shouldn't say always, but almost always is going to be, you're going to be on the promotion track. Because typically, and especially in big companies, when you're performing high, the next logical step is to move into the next role. I started turning down promotions. I spent 7 years where I didn't take a promotion because I didn't want it, because it didn't align with what I truly wanted to do. And at the same time, I was a very good individual contributor. So I know it may sound contradictory, and I know it may sound like crazy talk, but no, I start saying no to promotions. Promotions mean more time, more money, more travel. You don't get something for nothing. I know I've said it before. And so if you're really focused on getting the side hustle so that you can get more control over your time, you're going to get into a point where you're just going to have to say, hey, you know what? The promotion sounds great, but I'm not doing it. And if you don't have your boss's cover at a certain point, the company is going to go, well, what is going on with you? You're overperforming. You should be moving up the ladder. And if they don't understand it, there may be some challenges. So my suggestion is no promotions. And then lastly, and this is the fifth thing, and it took me a while to get this one. And so that's why I am sharing it with you. But you've got to come up with very clear boundaries. Talk to your boss about those boundaries, and be clear on what those boundaries are. Communicate them. And this is the hardest part. Respect the boundaries. Because while everybody else is going to every single meeting, while everybody else is going to every single activity, especially those recurring meetings when people show up and you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. If there's no clear focus, if there's no clear outcome for the meeting, like those recurring meetings that are like every couple of, or every week. And for the first month, people go, and then afterwards people show up and they're like, what are we even doing here? But they keep going. Like, cut that out. There's no reason, there's no objective, there's no specific result that's supposed to come from that. Stop going. If you are supposed to be at a meeting where you don't have anything to do, and you've already achieved your result, your boss is already there, well, you know what? Maybe you don't need to go to that meeting. Whatever the case may be, establish and agree boundaries, and then you also have to respect them. That also means if your work is done and then the call comes in the evening and you're in the car with your family or you're doing something else, don't answer the call. Just don't answer the call. It keeps it simple. So as these things, these 5 kind of steps or these 5 actions, they're really, really key. Now, if I think about where I wanted to be able to make more money and have more assets, well, I was able to get more assets and have more control over those assets. But ultimately, by being able to follow these kind of 5 principles or take these 5 actions, probably the best thing to say, I was able to literally increase my job performance. So I continued to be achieve over the quota. I continued to every other year go to Hawaii more or less as a top achiever. I increased the size of my own portfolio outside of the business because I'd also combined another strategy. And I think I talked about that. Maybe it was like episode 412 or something like that, where I talked about how I was creating more time in the beginning of the day. And then I also ultimately was creating increased productivity because the time, these time pockets of time during the day that were kind of wasted, I was now getting more control over these times, or by taking these 5 steps. And so having this framework helped me realize that I could apply it to a number of different situations. So if you are struggling and you've listened to this episode, take these 5 steps. If you've not taken any of these steps, take the first one. Definitely, you got to be sure that you're performing in your job. Focus on the results, not the time that you're spending, because you're probably wasting time during the day that you could be doing other stuff. And definitely don't be scrolling on your phone. Get your boss's buy-in. Make sure your boss understands what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it. And as long as you have the previous 2 steps in line, you'll more than likely be okay. The promotion path, like I said, spent 7 years turning down promotions, didn't even get involved at the end. And once my boss understood and knew why, it made it a lot easier. And then lastly, having the boundaries, communicating them, and most importantly, really applying and respecting them is something that is absolutely key. So take today's conversation, take the episode, share it with family, share it with friends, listen to it again. Heck, if you want to leave a review and let me know how this is working for you, it'd be fantastic to know that. But while you're taking today's episode, you're going from the theory that you're listening and you're putting it in action, you're getting the results, you're course correcting along the way. I'll be here preparing for the very next episode. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much.
Freedom!
Today's conversation was sponsored by the Billy Keels Advisory Program. If you're looking to make your 9-to-5 optional and need some help, just go to billykeels.com/advising. Once again, that's billykeels.com/advising.